Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
The little desiccated coconut's under pressure and he's attacking anything he can get his hands on.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
What does confrontational mean? It means you fight for what you believe.
Unless you're scripted, you're useless.
And if the yes vote is successful, we will be divided forever.
It is not merely our privilege to be strong, it is our duty to be strong.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Tripp. Merry Christmas and a very happy new year to everyone. I hope you enjoyed the time with your friends and family and had a great celebration to welcome in 2025. It's going to be a big year. We've got a federal election coming up here in Australia. There's the what's happening in America with Donald Trump, and also elsewhere in the world. It's going to be a very action-packed, no doubt, year, but I think it's going to have a lot of tremendous opportunities as well. And I think overall, it's going to be a positive year. Hopefully, I'm not putting the jinx on it, but I do have a feeling it's going to be a good year for all of us. So let's get right into it today. We're going to be discussing some very exciting things with Mr. Kevin Loughrey. But first, I'll let you know how you can support us. It's by heading to Buy Me a Coffee if you want to throw us a few dollars there. It really does help to help us along, helps to pay for the stream, helps to pay for the website, and also, most importantly, gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside, which I'm told by Katie McCallum is the most important thing. Also, if you want to donate to us directly, if you don't want to go through Buy Me a Coffee, head to the website, commandingthenarrative.com, hit the donate button, and there's some more direct routes there for you to donate if you choose that option. Also, while you're at Commanding the Narrative, sign up to the newsletter. A lot of people are giving me very good feedback about the newsletter. It's once a week. It's very short, has all our podcasts on there, any articles I might write, and events that are coming up, and also any other important information. It's in the top right-hand corner. You hit the sign-up button when you hit commandingthenarrative.com, and you'll get that newsletter. I encourage you to do so. Actually, I won't get to it straight away because I was going to bring up the Australians for Better Government, but I might bring that up when we have Kevin on. So I'll just finish up by letting you know about a rally that's going to come in February in Canberra at Parliament House. It's called the Freedom Rally 2025. It will be on Parliament House lawn in Canberra on Saturday, February 8th at 10 a.m. There's going to be more details coming out about this rally in the next few weeks. I'll let you know about the rally. If you do want to find out more, you can also head to commandingthenarrative.com. I'll put all the information up there as we hear it and as we learn it. But if we can get a big rally, a big turnout to the rally, I think it will be significant. We had one last year, the Reckless Renewables Rally, organized by the same group, which I'm also a part of, the National Rational Energy Network. And we had a great turnout there. We're hoping for a better turnout this time, not just focused on energy this time, but focused on all the issues that are plaguing us at the hands of government, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about today with my very special guest, returning once again, Mr. Kevin Loughrey. How are you today, Kevin?
I'm terrific. Thank you very much, Stephen. We're at the Horsham Sport and Community Centre. Meals here are fantastic. Staff are really friendly. And I'm just sort of sitting away from people. Hopefully, the sound's pretty good for you. There'll be a bit of talking and activity in the background. But otherwise, we're on a road trip, so we're having a great time.
No, I think people can understand that, Kevin, and it's not too bad. So that's not a problem. You're hitting the roads already. I think that's going to be a big part of your 2025, isn't it? Traveling around.
It is. Yeah. Well, we're sort of twixt and tween. I'm not really sure whether to go for the Senate, whether to go for the seat of Richmond, or whether simply to devote myself for Australians for a better government and forgo the other stuff. Whatever, I'm looking for a platform that you and I can spread the ideas and get people thinking that maybe we need to change the way that we are governed, especially the way that we conduct our elections. And that, in fact, is going to be one of the topics, which we will speak about today. So Moving on with that, the problem as I see it at this moment, we have a system which requires compulsory voting. And to put everybody at rest, I actually believe that compulsory voting, having looked at the pros and the cons, compulsory voting is the best system. That it is a civic duty that everybody, just like national service, if the country were under threat, there's nothing more threatening to your prosperity and happiness than a poor government. And so it's necessary that we do have compulsory voting, and compulsory voting, to some extent, reduces the effect that money will have on the outcome of an election. Once again, we, the Australian people, don't want to be ruled by a wealthy elite. So, but the big disadvantage of compulsory voting is that there is a sizable group of people within our community who are uninterested. And they're not necessarily bad people. It's just that they've got a whole lot of other stuff that they have to contend with in their life, like raising a family and so forth. Or they just feel, look, really, this isn't my bailiwick. I don't know much about politics. So if we were to organise our elections so as to nullify the effect of the uninterested voter, we would then hopefully have a lot of people or we would have the greater majority of people who are voting actually making a discerning choice. In other words, they would look at the politicians that were seeking, or wannabe politicians that are seeking election, and they would work out which ones they should really vote for. At present, that's not the case. At least 20% of the people are affected by how to vote leaflets, which are thrust into their hand a couple of minutes before they enter the polling booth. Our problem really stems from the problems that you and I are concerned about, even like the Mad Bill, the business of climate change, which is one huge scam, the terrific atrocities that were inflicted upon us during COVID. They're all the result of having poor quality people in Parliament with far too much power over us. And on top of that, we have constitutions at territory, state and federal level, which were never constructed with an eye to protecting us from bad government. They were simply there as a means of defining the nature of the government that we would all have to suffer under. They were constructed, the first one was the New South Wales Constitution Act of 1855, constructed by Governor Gipps and Governor Fitzroy, with the help of wealthy elites, William Wentworth and John MacArthur. So our system of democracy has a very poor genealogy right from the very beginning. And we really need now to be thinking about a Federation Mark II. The way that you can nullify the effect of the uninterested voter is firstly that you jumble up all the names on the ballot paper. You do not present
sorry,
mate, go on.
You're jumping way ahead.
Well, I thought we spend 10 minutes on this and then move into another area, but go for it, Stephen.
Well, we've got your presentation here that I do want to bring up because it's got all those.
Oh, okay.
Yep. But before we get into that, you basically laid the groundwork of why we started the Australians for Better Government.
Yes.
So we want to encourage everyone to go to the website. Now, it's australiansforbetter.com. Head to the website. There's a lot of information on there already. We are going to be adding a lot more information. It's a very complex issue. What we're really standing for. Kevin's already done a lot of information, a lot of back work, as we'll find out on this podcast today and other podcasts that no doubt the audience have already watched. So the website's building, but we really want you to go there to sign up to be members. Now, at the moment, it's free. So if you hit the join button, you'll get to this page and you can find all the membership options. You can donate if you wish. The standard membership is currently free, and there's also a VIP membership if you really want to turbocharge what we're doing. But I don't know if this is going to stay free forever, so jump on it now. I've been really encouraged by people signing up already. So it's been tremendously positive so far. But Kevin, why should people join? I mean, my answer is the more people that we can get behind us, then when we go towards lobbying politicians, speaking to politicians, or hosting events, ultimately we do want to move to a people's constitutional convention. The more people that we can get involved and be members of Australians for Better Government, the more powerful we will be, or the more influence that we can have. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Oh, absolutely. And look, the very first Commonwealth Constitution was constructed in a manner not unlike what you're talking about, but within the limitations of the fact that people had to travel around on horseback or by ship to travel any sort of distance. And now with the internet and so forth, we can get a lot of people involved in this. The fact of the matter is that the politicians are unlikely to want to change things. They're very happy with the status quo. After all, they are the beneficiaries of the present situation. And you'll find, as I have, that very few politicians want to do anything where they think that there's an element of risk. And the way that you can convince politicians that there isn't an element of risk is have a huge following. So, look, my wish is for us to attract around about 10 million people to become members of this movement. And when you think about it, if everybody were to put $10 into the pot, we'd have $100 million, and that would buy us an awful lot of publicity, and we'd be able to really get this system going. We don't need a lot of money from people. We just need a lot of people with a little money, each of them making a small contribution. And really, we've got to get those numbers because, believe me, the politicians will not move unless we do have those numbers.
And the main point of the whole movement is that we're relying on politicians to grant us our freedoms. We're not having the conversation ourselves. We need a group where the people can drive the change in this country politically. And that's what we're hoping to achieve with Australians for Better Government. And as Kevin alluded to, the more people that we have a part of this, the more influence that we will have. So it's incredibly important for people that are interested in this to jump on it and join. Head to the website australiansforbetter.com, hit the join button and come along this journey with us. It's going to be very exciting, I'm sure. I also want to let people know that the link to StreamYard is in the chat right now. If you want to call in and ask us a question, maybe have a question about Australians for Better Government, maybe you want to know how you can get involved, or maybe you just want to find out more about what we hope to achieve. So the link's there. Don't hesitate. Richard Storch is in the chat, Kevin. He says, run for Richmond, Kevin.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. Look, I'd like to just emphasize something else, and that is that we are a-party political. That is to say, although we're political, we're orientated towards the political system. Any person from any political party will find what we're talking about attractive if they are a patriot of this country and if they want what is best for their children, grandchildren, and their successors. I think any reasonable person would agree that the higher the quality of people in Parliament, the more probability there is of them making good decisions. And so right at the very beginning, we need to look at our system of election because I believe it is clearly failing us. We do not have high quality people in our Parliament at this moment, and we can do something to fix that. So the very first thing I think we ought to do is look at how we run our elections and get sufficient public pressure on our politicians for them to change the way that we presently conduct our elections.
Definitely. Now, we have a presentation that you have made. It's about improving the vote, which is a big part of what we want to do with Australians for Better Government. So let's bring the presentation up now and you can start moving your way through it.
And we'll be pretty quick in this too. This just basically goes through all of the things which have gone wrong since 1855 to the present day. People will be very interested to see that minimum wage is one of them. Within our constitution, there was a guarantee that if the Commonwealth took any property off you, they would recompense you justly for that property. In terms of an employer, their profit is their property, and by the government interposing itself between the employer and the employee, there is effectively a theft of property. If the government's concerned about the social standing of an employee, then the taxpayer should be the one who pays for it, not employers. And minimum wage has done enormous damage to our economy. Other things relate to changes which occurred, which gave rise to the Aboriginal industry and so forth. They're all linked up there. Could we have next slide? Yep. And so Australia, I think most people will agree with this after COVID, that we're on a dangerous path, and this is directly the result of poor quality political candidates being selected to stand for election, which I've already covered. And that's combined with poorly conducted elections leading to poor quality parliamentarians who have far too much power because of an inadequate separation between the legislature, judiciary and the executive branches of government. Now, that's something that most Australians have never pondered upon, but the Americans worked it out. And that is a reality, that you do not want politicians to be able to move too quickly. Every piece of legislation is dangerous to your liberty. And as a consequence, you want those politicians to debate it exhaustively before a decision is made to pass a particular piece of legislation. And lastly, we move to our Constitution, which I've already dealt with before, all of which come from effectively the Constitution of New South Wales, passed in the British Parliament in 1855. And the people who formed the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, now I've now obtained a huge book of over 1,000 pages, which are annotations that actually goes through all of the minutes of the meetings leading up to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. There was very, very little effort made or consideration given to protecting the rights of citizens and restricting the power of our government to do long-lasting harm. The Americans, on the other hand, had just come through a war of independence, so there was within their number a general dislike for power and for government, and their constitution goes a long way further to protecting the rights of citizens and restricting the power of their politicians. Next slide. Okay, so summarising, the way that we can get a better system of democracy is firstly improve the quality of our candidates standing for election, and I'll leave fertile minds to ponder how we might be able to do that. The next one is improve how elections are conducted. Next, we have to reform our system of government to ensure that there's a proper separation between the three branches of government. Now, my suggestion is that the Governor-General has to be popularly elected, and the Governor-General has to run the public service. We need to also elect the Attorney-General, and we must mandate that the Attorney-General has never been part of the judiciary, of the judicial system. And lastly, we need to reform our constitutions. Now, one of the things which may resonate with a number of Australians is that we should have in our constitution that no politician can sell off any sizable public asset without firstly seeking the consent of. My wife has just turned up with the.
I can hear you.
Oh,
You're
right.
really
Okay.
loud.
Oh, I'm being told I'm very loud as well.
Everybody can hear you in that.
Okay. Thank you. We might have to edit that, Tim.
We're live, Kevin.
I'm being told that I'm speaking too loudly, so I'll calm down a little. Am I audible now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. Look, no politician should be allowed to sell off a sizable public asset without firstly seeking the consent of the public. Somebody has said that libertarians wouldn't like that. I disagree. Libertarians are all about giving the power to the people. And the last thing you want to do is delegate your power to a bunch of politicians, I can assure you.
Can I just cut in and bring up?
Of course.
Go back to your point about the separation of powers, because we've talked about this in the past. But I just want to make the point that in Chapter 2 of the Australian Constitution, it details the executive, and the Governor General is meant to be the head of the executive as the Crown's representative. Now, there's no mention of the Prime Minister. There's no mention of specific members of Parliament. It does say that the Governor-General can select from members of Parliament, but the Governor-General should be running the executive branch, and that's where the separation is.
That's right.
The Prime Minister is the head of the legislature, of the Parliament, and the Governor-General is the head of the executive, and there should be that clear separation. As it is now, the Governor-General just goes to the Prime Minister and says, who do you want to be part of the executive? And basically, the Prime Minister with his or her ministers runs the executive, which is not a clear separation.
Exactly. And if I can just correct you on one thing, the Prime Minister is not the head of the legislature. The Speaker of the House is. Okay. And the Speaker of the House's role should be simply one of organisation and moderation, e.g. that when people get out of hand, the Speaker of the House has the power with the Sergeant-at-Arms to evict them out of the House.
What I should have said was that the Prime Minister is the head of the government.
Yeah, at this moment, and really shouldn't be. Queen Victoria and previous monarchs used that simply as a convenient means of being able to handle the House of Commons. But in this day and age, there is no need for us to have a Prime Minister, and there's definitely no need for us to have a cabinet. The sole role of the people in the legislature should be to represent their constituents. The way that the legislature controls the executive is that the legislature has to pass appropriation bills 1 and 2, and without those, the executive cannot do anything. Basically, the public service doesn't get paid. So that's where the legislature controls the executive. Now, the legislature then passes acts which indicate what the legislature want the Governor-General or the Governor to achieve. And they expect that the Governor or Governor-General will use the money which has been appropriated to them wisely and in a most cost-efficient fashion. Now, the problem we face is often people end up as governors who are ex-politicians who have never actually run a business and are not business savvy at all. And in fact, they have leanings back into the legislature. So if you're going to vote for a governor or a governor-general, the determinant should really be, would you trust this person to run your business? And if the answer is yes, then that's who you should vote for. You do not vote for a politician if you are electing a governor. You vote for a politician when you're electing your representative because you want that person to represent you in the most articulate and adroit fashion possible.
All right, let's get back to the slides. So we're pretty much finished up with this one. So where to start?
Well, how we might improve the system by which eligible citizens vote within the Commonwealth of Australia at council, territory, state and federal level. That's where we really got to start. And we should, as Australians, demand that all elections meet a certain standard without going terribly into the detail, but we require that they must meet a certain standard. For example, we require that all voters must vote secretly. Another thing, if we are talking about nullifying the uninterested voter, the way that you do this is that you jumble up the names on the ballot so that every ballot presents the candidates in a different order. That gets rid of the donkey voter. To further get rid of the uninterested voter, you ban the handing out of how to vote leaflets at the polling booth, because if someone can be convinced 3 minutes before they cast their vote how they're going to vote, they've given no thought to it at all. Another thing, this is showing you how you can jumble up the names on a ballot paper. Now, you'll notice that each person appears in a different column there, and even when their names are jumbled around, they are still in the same column. And that makes it very easy for you to mark the ballots, to count the ballots. If you get rid of how to vote cards, then the person has to know who they're voting for, or the randomness of the ballot will nullify their vote. Another thing you should do is that there should not be a political party mentioned on the ballot. Once again, if they don't know to which party each of the candidates belong to, they haven't given any thought to voting, and you do not want their vote to count. You want all of those people who have given a lot of thought to this issue to have their votes counted, and you don't want the person who is complacent, apathetic and turned up on the day simply because they would be fined otherwise.
And people are meant to vote for the candidate, not the party, so that makes sense.
Exactly, and that's why you get rid of the party off the thing, and that forces them then to go back and look at each of the candidates. Now, there are other things we could do as well to help the public become more important, and that is, well, somebody just mentioned pre-polling. Pre-polling shouldn't be allowed because you want everybody to be as informed as is humanly possible about each candidate and what they stand for. And if the campaign has not run its full course, then by definition they are not fully informed. So voting should happen on one day. If people can't get to the polling booth on that day, we do have a system of absentee voting, and that system is a little inconvenient. So it more or less makes sure that only those people who genuinely cannot get to the polling booth on the day go for an absentee vote. And that improves the quality of your election. But I was also going to say that we have to make it really easy for electors to be able to learn about the candidates, and that's where the electoral commissions could play a vital role. They could have a web page where everybody who is running for a particular election, say for a particular electorate or for the state in the case of senators, where all of the candidates are listed. And when you click on a candidate, it would then take you to that candidate's web page, and you could study how, what this candidate stands for and so forth, so that in your own time you can make up a decision as to who you're going to vote for. And then in anonymity, using a VPN, you could create your own how to vote aid memoir, which you take along to the polling booth, either on your phone or on a piece of paper, however you wish to do it. So there's an example also where we then make sure that when people are casting a vote, they are better informed than what they are now. As an inducement for them to go to the Electoral Commission, it would also be a good idea if we had then an express lane. So anybody who had made up their own how to vote card would be entitled to join the express lane, and they would be processed much faster at the polling booths. That brings me to another point. We can greatly improve the way that we presently process our voters, and we could be much tighter on ensuring that people do not vote twice and that the person standing there is actually the person who is on the voter roll. So there's a lot of room all over for improvement.
I want to make a couple of points before we move on. James says, why not get rid of compulsory voting? We discussed that a little bit in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm happy to cover it again.
This is just
there are a number of reasons. The first is that if you say, look, voting is compulsory, it will cause people to become more politically aware. They have to go and vote. So a lot of people who would otherwise not will take some time to look into what's happening, who's running for election and so forth. But importantly, it reduces or nullifies the effect that money will have in determining who gets elected. If you have optional voting, then a lot of money has to be spent to get people out of their houses down to the polling booth to vote. And that, as I say to you, that is the last thing you want to have happen. You also don't want people going to vote who are roused out of their houses by large organizations like unions. And I say here, they say, under the present system, uninterested, apathetic, lazy, in some cases immature voters influenced by a Marxist education system, media and political parties working for the globalist elite now determine who gets to govern. What could possibly go wrong? And that's what this is all about. This reform is all about.
Yes. So we're jumping around a bit, but we'll probably put this presentation up on the website at some point. But what's interesting about the Australians for Better Government is that there's an element of discussion in this group, and there's points that Kevin and I disagree on as well. One of the points I might disagree with you on is this voting age. You're proposing to lift it to 25. Now, my view on that is if we're sending people to war at the age of 18, and you're going to be probably the best person to ask this question to because you're a lieutenant colonel, we're sending people to war at 18, but then telling them when they come back from duty that they're still not able to vote. Don't you think that's incredibly unfair?
Absolutely, it's unfair. And there are some countries that say that nobody can serve in combat until they're 25 years of age. There are actually countries in the world which have that as their rule, and that is a rule that I would invoke. If you were an enlisted man who had volunteered, and only if you volunteered could you be sent to a war zone? Now, most Australians don't realise that until you turn 21 as a national serviceman, you could not go to Vietnam. If, on the other hand, you had, as I did, joined the army at the age of 17, after I'd done my basic training, I could, if I volunteered, go to Vietnam. So I'm simply saying, yes, I'm in total agreement with you, Stephen, that it's not right that a person should be denied the right to vote and be sent off to war by compulsion. But I've got another little lolly in the sack to induce people, and that is that there shouldn't be any taxation without representation. And in other words, unless you can vote, you shouldn't be taxed. And I say, yes, I agree emphatically with that as well. So anybody up to the age of 25 would enjoy a tax-free holiday. Doesn't matter what they earn, they do not get taxed. They obviously will pay GST, but I'm talking about income tax. So I'm saying to all of the people out there who are under the age of 25, listen, two things. Firstly, you won't be sent to a war zone until you're 25 if we're in dire straits. And secondly, that you will not be taxed until you can vote. And that's a guarantee. So whenever you're eligible to vote, then and only then will you be paying tax.
Well, governments are not going to like that because they're going to need those younger taxpayers to prop up the pension system for the elderly.
Well, the reality is that most people don't pay a lot of tax before they're 25 years of age. They are, in fact, on the government tit, and that's a fact. They're either going to university or they could be doing an apprenticeship or whatever, or they're on the dole. But they're people under the age of 25 pay very little tax compared to those people over that age.
We've got a couple.
And that might also, by the way, help them. If I can just leap in there, I just had this sudden thought. That might actually be good for our economy as well, because not being burdened by tax, young people would be better positioned to start their own business and get things rolling. So good luck to them.
For a deposit for a house, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I have other ideas, by the way. I'm all for that as well. But I have ideas by which we could reduce the cost of a house of land. And when I say land, I'm talking of something in the order of 800 square meters and a modest three-bedroom house for $200,000.
Be careful, because this podcast will become 3 hours if we... Going
yeah. No, of course. But
yeah, we will discuss that.
I'm suitably, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So a couple comments. Both Tony and Richard agree that it should be an age of 21 to vote. Richard's saying simple solution: voting age of 21, or you are a taxpayer. But James says, didn't young people overwhelmingly vote for Trump and reform and populist parties in Europe?
I don't think so. My experience at the polling booth is that anybody under the age of 30 was voting Green. That's been my experience. But maybe that's the electorates I'm in.
I think it was Generation X, which is my generation and a little bit younger. So I guess 30s and above. 40s, they were the younger ones than that. Yeah, as you said, they're straight out of university. They're voting along Marxist lines and leftist lines. That sort of thing. I mean, there is a movement growing as well, because there's a lot of rebellion taking place. A lot of younger people, particularly men, are rebelling against their teachers and their lecturers and all this woke garbage that they're being confronted with. But that'd be. Anyway,
look, I've got another thing I'd like to inject there as well, and that is, first, obviously, the reason I'm suggesting 25 is that most psychologists agree that the human brain is not fully mature until it's around 25, going 30. By the way, 25 is the lower part of it. A 21-year-old is not mature. And the second thing is that if you did do this, then it would make voting important to young people. In other words, it would be a passage of right. It would be something that they look forward to and say, yes, this is now I'm considered by the community to be an adult, and I've got to take this very seriously, and that's got to improve the quality of our vote. If you get something really easily, you just take it for granted. But if it's something that's really special, then you say, yeah, this is really important. I'm being given the right to vote, and I should value it, treasure it, and we should.
Okay, and one of the other things we wanted to talk about today is a little bit interesting. I'm interested in it. Is open source software. So you have this presentation.
And we're running pretty much to schedule too, Stephen. I'm really pleased. I'm really impressed at that. Thank you, mate. It's all over to you.
We're pushing through today. I mean, we're on a bit of a schedule. We would like to draw these out, but we can do that in the future. I mean, this is an ongoing movement. We're not going to solve all the world's problems with one podcast. So the value of open source software to government and business. What are you talking about here, Kevin? What does all this mean?
Well, before I even start on this, I'd just like to say to the listeners that the website that you saw is the result of Stephen Tripp. And I'm so grateful to be in his company. And of course, he couldn't say this, but I can. That website is Stephen Tripp Innovation. I'm just somebody who has a whole lot of ideas, and Stephen has been most gracious in giving me an opportunity to vent them. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Speaking of the website, just a reminder, head there now, australiansforbetter.com, hit the join button and sign up to be a member if you think all what we're talking about is very valuable. As I said in the beginning, membership is currently free. I don't know if it's going to stay that way forever. One thing I didn't mention as well is that there are some social media accounts now popping up. There's not too much content up there currently, but if you want to follow us on Facebook, X, or YouTube, you can. In the top right-hand corner, you can click those buttons and follow us on social media and keep up to date with stuff that we're doing. There'll also be a newsletter coming out very, very soon as well.
Okay, we're on to open source software.
Let's go for it.
Okay, most people would say, what is open source software? Well, all software is driven by what is called source code. And that's an English-like language. In this presentation, by the way, I'm going to deal with what is meant by open source software, what's its significance, what OSS is immediately useful to you, and who is using it, and what are the benefits to government, private businesses, and individuals. And believe me, the benefits are huge. So let's go. Okay, the answer to this question that you need to know is what is source code and what is open source code. Next slide. Now, a computer's central processing unit usually executes binary code, generally unintelligible to normal humans. So what we do is we write in an English-like language, which is called source code, and this is then converted by a program into binary code, which the central processing unit uses to create the program you're looking at right at this very moment. Now, this English-like code is called source code. Next slide. And the result of this English-like language source code and the syntax used is called a programming language. We really could have done without that slide. Next one. Okay, some programming languages that we have are assembly, C, BASIC, Fortran, COBOL. COBOL, by the way, stands for Common Business Orientated Language. I know you all needed to know that. Pascal, which is my favorite language. Python, which is a new language, relatively new language. Java, which is even newer. I actually met the progenitor of Java when I was over in the US at Santa Clara visiting Sun Microsystems. Next slide. Okay, this gives you an example of what source code looks like, where you say savings equals 0, e.g. nothing in the bank. The number of months that there are in a year is 12. So you say, look, from n equals 1 to the number of months, do, and then you've got begin and end. So you say savings equals savings plus monthly income for each month, which is that n there. And then you say, if savings do not equal 0, then print the results. And so you're going to print out your results. Now, that's what source code looks like. That's really, really simple, but that's what source code looks like. You put that into a compiler or what's called an interpreter. It'll turn it into binary code, and your computer then executes that. And voila, that's what you're looking at when you see this screen. Next slide. Okay. Now, to know how a program works, you need to be able to see the source code. Seeing the binary code is not going to do any good. And with open source software, it's covered by a thing called the GPL, the Greater Public or General Public License, or the Lesser General Public License. And WAGs have said it's not actually copyright, it's called copy left, because in a way it's sort of a socialist movement in that respect. Everybody gets access to the source code. Next slide. Now, a common question that many people will ask, well, listen, if you're going to give away the source code, how are you going to make any money? And the reality is you don't sell a product, you're actually selling a service, because all sophisticated software requires that it has to be tailored to suit a particular business. And you make the money tailoring the software and also writing new code. Now, with open source software, if you write code and you distribute it, then you must make available to everybody else that source code. Next slide. Great. Now, there's a societal benefit. Human advancement has been dependent on the sharing of information, and combined with the internet, this will change the world. The commercial model is that you sell services rather than a product. In actuality, this is a much better situation to be in, because if someone comes along with a better product, cheaper, you're out of business. But when you're selling your service, you establish a rapport and a relationship with the people you are providing that service to. And if you're a good person, that will be enduring. Now, lastly, if you're a user of software, your success in business is determined by you being able to enact your management style in the form of your software. If you're just using off-the-shelf software, you'll be the same as everybody else, so you won't have a competitive edge. If you use open source software, on the other hand, you will have a competitive edge. Next slide. Okay, the significance of this initiative is it will reduce the cost of government by over $1 billion. Most people don't realize that. But if you were to use open source software instead of software which the government buys, you would reduce the cost of government by over $1 billion. You would boost the Australian economy, and you would give our youth a future, and you would help avert ecological disaster on this planet. So we're talking about cost-affordable software combined with modest hardware, and the internet can rapidly transform societies, raise the status of women, and thereby reduce the rate of world population growth and extremism. And that all happens naturally. So we head towards a much better planet if we were to adopt open source software. Next slide. Okay, here's some examples. When you're looking at your computer, you're looking at a graphical user interface, and what I'm showing you here is an interface called KDE. That's open source. Next one. Next slide.
Yeah, give me 1 sec. Sorry.
Here's another graphical user interface. It's called GNOME, and that's the one that I use on my computers. I run only Linux, the Linux operating system, on my computer, and my graphical user interface is GNOME. Next one. By the way, this is all free. This is another graphical user interface called XFIS, and it's actually a cut down one that would run on, say, a mobile phone or on a computer with limited memory and processor. Next one. Okay, here's another one. Next slide. Okay, here are distributions of the Linux operating system. And that's Debian, Red Hat, SUSE, Mandriva, Ubuntu, and Android. I actually use Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is built upon what's called Debian Linux, which is the only real true Linux operating system. Next one. Okay, 90% of the world's fastest computers run Linux, and I can tell you now that nearly all of the super sensitive, super secure, super secret systems in the world run Linux. 1% of the world's fastest computers run Windows. 85% of the world's computers run Windows, but 5% of the world's desktop computers run Linux, and I'm one of them. But when you hop into your motor car, nearly always, and by the way, anybody who uses an Android phone, almost everything that is used to control refrigerators or your car or whatever is running the Linux operating system because it's free. And the people who are programming it in the motor car industry or running your electric stove or your refrigerator, they get to see all the source code so they can alter it as they wish and make it perfect for their particular appliance. Next slide. Next. Okay. Useful open source software, firstly, is the operating system, and I'm using Ubuntu Linux. Next is the application. And then lastly, there are these core modules which you can use to build your own software. So let's go. Next. Okay. Useful applications are email. I use Thunderbird for all of my email. It's free. Next. And by the way, Thunderbird runs on Windows and Apple as well. Evolution is another thing, another email system and organizer that looks like MS Outlook, only it's better and it's free. Next. By the way, it runs on Windows and Apple and Linux. Web browser, Mozilla. I use Mozilla as my web browser. It's Firefox, runs on Windows, Apple, and Linux. Next. It's all open source, by the way. You can get all of the access to all of the source code. The web browser for Google is largely open source. Google have now proprietized a lot of their code so that you can't get to it. Next. Okay, LibreOffice, this is what I use. It's an office suite. It consists of a writer, a display package, which is like PowerPoint, and also a drawing package, which is far superior to Microsoft Draw. It also comes with a mathematics package and a spreadsheet called LibreOffice Calc. Next slide.
So
that's writer that you're looking at.
What you're saying, instead of people spending $140 odd a year on Microsoft Office subscriptions, they can use this.
Absolutely. And to me, it's superior. It's much easier to use, and I use it for everything. This presentation, which you're looking at, was created with LibreOffice Impress. All of my writing that I do is all done in LibreOffice Writer. My spreadsheets are done in LibreOffice Calc, and you can write programs in various languages underneath the LibreOffice Calc.
Not only can the government save money, but private citizens can also save money through this.
Everybody, and businesses, especially businesses, very important for businesses. Like a Linux server, I've had a Linux server running since 1997, and it has never crashed. Never crashed, never gotten a virus. I update it, obviously. The Linux server I now have running bears no resemblance to the one I had in 1997 because it's been updated from head to toe continuously and free of charge.
Do people need to learn source code to be able to operate them?
No. Thanks to Ubuntu in particular, you now have a graphical user interface that rivals Windows. It's actually simpler than Windows.
Okay. All right.
And people find this hard to believe. But if I was in government, I would promote this. I would actually have it being taught at TAFEs, because a lot of people have learnt how to use Windows and how to use an Apple. They've learnt it over many years. And quite rightly, they're reticent to move away from something that they know all about to something they don't. But if you're exposed to it, you would become used to it.
We did learn source code in school. I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was during like computer class and stuff like that. So it is taught. I think I have heard. But
you don't need to know anything about source code, by the way. And I only introduced that so that you would understand what open source is all about. And also the fact that anybody who is proficient in programming can access all of the source code underneath these programs and alter it as they wish. And if they distribute that, they must, quid pro quo, allow everybody else to see their source code as well. After all, they got the source code for free. It's only fair that they should share their efforts with everybody as well. The consequence of this is the whole community benefits.
Would you say it's a communistic type of policy, or is it, I guess it's not libertarians, because the libertarians would want to make money out of it, wouldn't they?
I won't go there. But no, it's very much like a farming community in a way, in that I'm ploughing my field and doing things, and I'm learning things about the soil, and I share this with my neighbours. And my neighbours then employ what I've learned in their thing, and it benefits the whole community because we're now producing a lot more food. So it's along that sort of model. I can't emphasize enough that you make your money out of open source by selling your services and your ingenuity rather than just selling a product. Because the truth of the matter is we've done it all.
This is an example of an Excel or spreadsheet like
That's
program.
Right. Exactly. And I use this extensively when I'm doing statistics and so forth.
Yeah. Okay.
Next slide. This is the presentation package, which we're presently using. This what you're seeing there was produced in LibreOffice Impress.
Okay,
Next slide.
So like a PowerPoint.
It is a PowerPoint, yeah. And it does everything that PowerPoint can do. This is a database. And really, this is for me, not so much for you guys, but there are a number of databases which are open source. The very top one is the big elephant, which is called PostgreSQL. It is better than Oracle as a database, and it costs nothing. And I've programmed in it, and it is just mind-blowing. It is unlimited. PostgreSQL is absolutely unlimited. Firebird SQL, I wrote a package that managed strata management companies. I had sold my software to 5 different strata management companies, and they were using the Firebird backend, and I was using a Microsoft Access as my front end at that time. Next, go.
Actually, can I jump in with a question?
Of course.
A lot of people are probably looking at these and saying, well, these look like knockoffs of Microsoft products. Is it is it the chicken before the egg scenario? Did Microsoft or was Microsoft copied by these programs, or is Microsoft stealing ideas from these programs that come out first?
It's the reverse. Microsoft, not so much stealing, but borrowing without actually giving acknowledgement. Microsoft made a big deal about the TCP/IP stack. And then when it was about to go to court, they pulled back because they suddenly discovered that they had borrowed all of this software from the open source community, which managed TCP/IP, which is actually the foundation of the whole internet. And that was developed by the open source community.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So, yeah. And by the way, Microsoft actually copied the graphics environment management package, which preceded Apple. And Apple copied the GEM environment. And everybody's been working in a similar direction. There's a certain way of doing things, and we all eventually end up going in that particular direction. I guess it's a bit like, why do humans have 5 fingers? Turned out that evolutionary wise, that was the best arrangement.
Yeah.
So open source software is absolutely the leader. The other people copy open source software and make it proprietary. This is LibreOffice Draw. This is stuff that I've used as well. I've done some quite sophisticated drawings at times in LibreOffice Draw. Next slide. That's an example of it. I came up with a new type of barbecue plate made of glass, and it's made out of a borax glass, which basically won't break when you heat it. But yeah, there's an example of what I was able to draw. Wow. Okay, next. The math package, I won't go there. I actually haven't used it much, but those persons who are studying pure maths at university swear by it. Next slide. Okay, there are all manner of extensions that you can get for LibreOffice, language extensions and so forth. It's a bottomless pit. Next slide. Okay, a comprehensive feature-rich Office suite compatible with Microsoft Office. Its main features are it's totally free, and you can get the source code if you want to. It has regular updates. You have access to all the source code, and it can be tailored to suit your exact needs. That's LibreOffice. Next. Okay, this is Shotwell and F-Shot. This is how you can manage your photograph albums. That's open source. Next. Antivirus and anti-spyware. Now, I don't run on Linux any antivirus. I don't have to, because I can see every single program that is running on my computer, and therefore I can rapidly identify anything that shouldn't be there. In the case of Microsoft, they rely on a thing called a registry. It's encrypted to stop people being able to copy them. The consequence of that is when virus manufacturers learn about the registry, they get inside that registry and they create merry hell. Now, you don't need antivirus if you're running open source and you are skilled. You may need it if you are not a skilled person, but there's nothing that I can't do in open source if I want to. Next. Okay, and these, by the way, run on Windows and run on Apple. It's clam-free antivirus, and it's open source. Next. Home entertainment. I actually made a thing called Myth TV, and it allowed me to record something like 5 channels simultaneously, plus watch another channel. It's no longer, it's no longer necessary now that we have internet TV. But yeah, I with the help of a brilliant chap called Michael Vanderkolk, I developed this package to use, and we were trying to sell it at one stage. Next. Special applications for business. You've got, enterprise resource planning systems. Now, this is relevant to running hospitals. We could save billions of dollars a year if everybody from the humble GP through to the general hospital used open source software, used this enterprise resource planning scheme, which we could develop as a community here in Australia to serve our medical industry. You can also use it in businesses. So, you've heard me say that if I were in government, if I could, I would make it free for anybody to set up a business, and then I would offer them 2 years of mentoring and tuition at a TAFE to learn how to run their business. When you're running a business, two things are paramount. Firstly, you've got to have a chart of accounts, and secondly, you've got to be able to advertise yourself. And I have ideas as to how we could help small businesses in both areas free of charge. Next. Okay, these are business ERPs, enterprise resource planning packages, and I covered what they actually look at, such things as customer relationship management, your accounts, planning packages, you name it. An enterprise resource planning package has got it all for you to run a business, small or large. Next.
We're probably getting towards the end. We're running out of time.
We are. Yeah.
I think people get the idea of all the good applications that you can have, and basically I'm getting the sense that any application that you use in Windows, there's a equivalent on Linux or
it is.
One of the other.
It is, and better.
Now, how can we apply this to government? You're saying that we could save, I can't remember the figure that you used in the beginning. Billions of dollars.
Well, there is a problem. I tried when I was an army officer. I tried to introduce it into defence, and I couldn't get any traction at all. Now that I'm, basically living in Ballina Shire, the mayor very graciously organised for me to meet with the systems manager of Ballina Shire. And the systems manager wasn't interested at all in this. Now, there's a good reason for this. He's paid to run a computer system. That computer system is Windows and IBM and anything else that is proprietary. If anything goes wrong, he's going to be in the gun. So the last thing he wants is to do anything that is in any way entrepreneurial. Well, he's spending other people's money, and he's not unusual. I mean, I totally relate to what he's saying. But anything like this involves risk, and he's not into risk. He wants something all packaged and ready to go. And so it needs for government to say, look, let's set up a project to look at how we might be able to introduce this sort of software into all of government. And you do it step by step.
It's not such a niche thing. This is a slide that you've got here. Linux's share of the world internet server market, 2000 it was at 2%. The year 2007 it was at 12%, and then in 2011 it jumped to 85%, largely thanks to Google, Amazon, eBay, IBM, HP, and so on.
That's right.
So you're saying Google? You've got this slide here. Google has more than 1 million Linux.
Yeah. It's the largest user of Linux, of the Linux operating system in the world. It is just humongous.
Wow.
If you flick on, U.S. Navy submarines run Linux. Next. You wouldn't trust Windows on a nuclear submarine, believe me. U.S. Department of Defense, their top secret systems all run Linux because it's uncrackable. City of Munich experimented with it, and they got torpedoed by Microsoft.
Yep. Okay. All right. So you've got a whole bunch of different, a whole host of significant users. Big, some of them here: IBM, Panasonic, Virgin, Cisco, Amazon. So these companies are going along with it. They're using it, but
that's right.
The Australian government is not. Now, you point out a link between the Australian government and Microsoft. Can you explain that?
Oh, yeah. Look, when I was in defence, there was no doubt that the Microsoft representative in Canberra had worn a path into the Chief Information Officer's office, and basically the guy who was Chief Technology Officer The Department of Education, for example, in New South Wales, spent $10 million a year. I tried to get Adrian Piccoli involved in this, and he wouldn't have a bar of it.
So this is $10 million directly to Microsoft.
That's right. That's right.
Site license.
That's right. Yeah, and this is all avoidable. You could, if we, now you wouldn't be able to do it overnight, so don't for a moment think that you can just flick a switch on the wall. What you've got to do is you've got to have people in government who have vision, who say, look, this appears to have merit. Let's form a team and let's see how far we can take this, because we're not going to lose anything doing this, but by jingies, we could gain an awful lot. We could get a truly indigenous IT industry in this country, instead of us being basically the puppets of the large multinationals.
Yes. Well, look, what about, I know banks don't use Windows as well.
Yes, they do. They use Linux. Oh, yeah, banks, a number of banks at the top level. And you know, when you're doing your banking, you're actually using open source software. The encryption, like AES 256, what's called secure socket layer, that's all open source. It's all open source. And
they say that Apple products are pretty much unhackable, or there's very few viruses on them compared to Microsoft.
Yes.
You're saying Linux and open source are similar. How come Microsoft products are so infested with viruses and Trojans?
Well, they started from the wrong point. By the way, all Apple products are built on Berkeley system development, which is basically a Linux. It's a POSIX compliant open source operating system that had a more liberal license than the Linux, and that's why Steve Jobs grabbed it. And the kernel of iOS is still open source. It's called Darwin. You can actually get the source code to the Apple kernel to this day.
This slide
Most
here,
people don't know that.
you've got an interesting point on this slide. There are 200 million PCs scrapped every year, often because they are too slow for Windows, but would run Linux acceptably well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, you can actually tailor Linux so that it will run on a slow speed processor with minimal memory, and that's why it finds its way into refrigerators and washing machines and controlling cars, because you can basically configure it. You can strip it down to only the essentials you need for that particular appliance. You've got full control, full visibility of all the source code. And what's more, if you get stuck, you've got a group of people out there who will give you their labor for free just because they love doing this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, well, people will probably scratching their head going, why are we talking about this? Well, it's all about Australians for better government. Part of that is how government can function more appropriately, more streamlined, save some money. If you're talking about all this money going to Microsoft just to use their systems, and their systems could be outpaced by Linux, then
believe me, we're just scratching the surface here, Steve, and I've got so many different ideas where this country is hemorrhaging money because of a lack of imagination.
Yep, definitely. Look, I know we're right on time now. You're out with friends, so we better let you go, but no doubt I'll have you back on the show at some point very, very soon. But just to remind people, we've been talking about it the whole way along. Kevin and I are both very, very excited about the Australians for Better Government. So please, we want you to join us and be a part of it. Head to the website, australiansforbetter.com, hit the join button and become part of the movement. Become a member. As I've been saying all the way through, it's currently free. People are already jumping on and signing up, which I've been encouraged by. Unfortunately, we will need to know your name. Someone tried to sign up yesterday without putting their name in. I had to cancel their membership, unfortunately. We need to know who you are, but jump on it. As Kevin and I said in the beginning, it might not be free forever. We'll have to discuss that at some point. It won't be very expensive, probably be like $20 membership eventually, but now's the time. Get involved, become a inaugural member, and come on this journey with us. Hopefully we can achieve a lot.
And if you can't afford to deposit anything, it would be most gratefully received, I can assure you. And we're not talking huge amounts of money. But even like I'm doing things like getting a dedicated server and so forth, and that's costing me around about $3,000 a year. It gives me an unlimited number of emails that we can send out, and we've got to be talking in millions of people in the long term. So any little amount of money that you can donate to this effort would be very much appreciated and would go a long way, I can assure you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Steve, for everything you're doing. I'm really grateful.
No problem at all, Kevin, and thank you to everyone. Also, I will remind you to head to commandingthenarrative.com if you want to stay up to date with all the podcasts and all the everything I'm involved with. Head to commandingthenarrative.com, hit the sign up button there. So the two websites you need to head to, commandingthenarrative.com and australiansforbetter.com, and get on board with everything here, everything that we're involved with, and hopefully we can bring more and more people into this movement. But Kevin, I know you're traveling, you're with friends.
Thanks,
I'll
mate.
let you go. Thank you very much, and we'll see everyone
Cheers,
next
mate.
time. Bye.
Bye.